Hello, everyone. I'm Satanik Mukherjee, a PhD student in the group of Professor Lisbeth Gerries in the University of Leuven in Belgium. I was one of the recipients of the European Society of Biomechanics Mobility Award 2022. And this award helped me in doing a research stay in the University of Twente in the developmental bioengineering group, where I work with Professor Marcel Karpedian and Professor Nico Scott. So for me, my PhD thesis is primarily focused on developing multi-scale models for cartilage degeneration and cartilage regeneration. And the work that is done in our lab in Leuven is primarily computational modeling work. And in due course of my PhD, I have been developing these multi-scale models, which goes from the knee joint up to the cellular cells in the cartilage, which are the chondrocytes, and then what are the mechanotransduction pathways that are activated as a result of mechanics in the cartilage. But most of my work during my PhD was focused on developing these computational models. And once those models were developed, I needed experimental data to validate my models. And this is where this collaboration between the University of Twente was very essential. So I came across the work from the developmental bioengineering group in the University of Twente in one of the conferences, where a student from the group presented a very cool microfluidic setup that they had designed. It was called the cartilage-on-chip setup. And the setup was very interesting for me because in the setup, they could subject chondrocytes seated in agarose hydrogels to dynamic mechanical stimulus and see the effect of those mechanical signals on those chondrocytes or the cells of that reside in articular cartilage. And subsequently, I got in touch with the people in Twente, and I found that would be really interesting for me to go there and to do targeted experiments, which would enable me in validating the different length scales of the multi-scale model that I have been developing in my PhD. And that's how we started our our collaboration. And subsequently, I came to know about this European Society of Biomechanics Mobility Award, which would be very essential for providing me with the funding that would allow me to go from Leuven to Twente in the Netherlands for staying there for a few months and doing these targeted experiments. So with that, we were constantly in touch with our collaborators in Twente, and subsequently I formulated a plan and then submitted it for the ESB Mobility Award, and I was overjoyed when I got it in the ESB meeting in 2022, and just after that I planned for this research stay, which started in September 2022 and it went on till the end of November 2022. So I was there for a period of 3 months. So during the research stay, what I did working together with the people in Twente is that we designed specific experiments in the cartilage-on-chip microfluidic setup, which would enable us to look into the different stages of cartilage regeneration when these chondrocytes in this setup are subjected to mechanical loading. And it was really interesting for us to be able to measure not only the deformation of the hydrogel in which these chondrocytes are embedded, but also to look into individual cells and see how they are deforming as a result of mechanical stimulus. Subsequently, we could also do some immunofluorescence staining of these cells that were subjected to mechanical compression for a longer time span of, say, 14 days. And we were able to also look into, by doing confocal microscopy, look into the deposition of the relevant extracellular matrix proteins such as collagen 2, collagen 6, and also aggregans. And this provided me with very essential experimental data in the different length scales, not just in the gel level or the tissue level, but also in the cellular levels and the behavior of the cells. And this experimental data has been very, very, very essential for me to validate the different length scales of my multi-scale model. And overall, it was a very, very nice experience to be staying in a different lab for a period of 3 months. And I would really like to emphasize some of the very, very interesting perspectives that I gained while doing this research stay. The first one was this, that I did most of my PhD work in Leuven and my research group is primarily a research group which is focused on in silico modeling techniques, different technologies. So my experience with interaction more in my group was with other people who do computational modeling. Whereas the research day that I did in Twente, it was a purely experimental group. So during the research day, I got involved with the experiment, so that gave me a lot of experience with how the experiments work and how many different ways it can go wrong, which sometimes we would appreciate less from the modeling side of things. And subsequently, given that it was an experimental group in the Twente, what I also got to know is how these experiments are planned. So if I need particular amount of data from an experiment, they need to be planned properly so that all the data can be obtained with the minimal amount of effort and in a systematic manner. So this whole concept of planning and executing experiments was something that I learned specifically while doing this research day, which is a very, very important skill that I gained during this collaborative research day in Twente. The other thing that is very important for me to gain experience was how to collaborate with experimentalists. It's because we as modelers have a different perspectives on how experiments are performed, and when we are directly collaborating with experimentalists, especially seeing them in action and participating in those experiments, you get much more hands-on experience, which also has helped me in developing the models and refining the models in a way that they correspond more closer to the experiments, which was an added value for these research stay. And another added value that I find was that during the course of my research stay, I interacted with a lot of experimentalists in Twente. And some of us also discussed about some possible future collaborations, some future projects, which we are going to explore in the next few months. So it not only gave me experience about experiments, but also gave me new ideas which can later be explored. And that ensures that there is a permanent long-term collaboration that happened as a result of this research stay. Another very important gain that I made during the research stay is that I got feedback about the work that I've been doing in my PhD from other people whom I would have not met otherwise. So in Twente, I did participate in presenting my PhD work in some data sessions there, and there were people in the audience from slightly different backgrounds, and they commented on my work and gave me very nice feedback, which was a very essential thing for me to gain during the research stay. Another thing that I would like to highlight is, apart from the academic aspects of doing a research stay in a different country, in a different environment, there is also a huge amount of social aspect that you get to know while doing a research in a different country. For me, even though I went from Belgium to the Netherlands, which are neighboring countries, but the way of communication and the way of interaction is very different in between these two countries. So say, for example, during lunchtime conversations, or during, say, after work drinks, all these different scenarios, different social scenarios, I get to learn a lot more about the local way of communication, and that in itself has helped me in developing my communication skills as well, in order to be able to communicate with people from different backgrounds and diverse research groups. A specific point that I also want to mention here is that in Twente, they have a very, very nice tradition of which is happening every other week. So it's a bi-weekly tradition where they have on every Friday, they have an event called Science and Beers. So where they would sit together with some beers, but someone would present, say, a technique or a new technology that someone had learned, and by a very informal way of communication, they would learn from each other. And I participated in these Science and Beers sessions, and they were a really nice way to interact informally about science and learn from each other the different techniques and the different methods that they have learned in due course of the research. So these are some very, very interesting perspectives which I took back during my research stay there. Another very interesting point that I want to mention here is, while doing a research stay in a different lab, I was also experiencing a different mode of supervision, because during my research stay, I was also supervised by Professor Marcel Carpedian there in Twente, who was the supervisor who was taking care of me during my visit there. And it is also very interesting because then different people have different ways of supervision. And as a trainee, it is also very important to experience this different type of supervision, to know more about which type of supervision works more for me, or to discover more about myself, how I want to be supervised. And these perspectives are something that I got when I was working with a different supervisor in this short period of time, which is something that has been quite valuable for me. And finally, it was also very interesting for me to see the dynamics of how work is done in a different environment as compared to what I have in Leuven. So how people interact with each other, how collaborations are being made, how different people within the same group communicate with each other around the research, and how they solve problems, having a collective approach toward research. So all these factors were something that I saw from a very different perspective during my research stay in Twente. So in all, to sum up, I would like to say that doing a research stay in a different country, in a different lab, for me has been a very, very valuable and enriching experience. And I would strongly like to thank the European Society of Biomechanics for providing me with the funding and the opportunity to do this research stay. And to conclude, I must say that I would encourage everyone who are part of the community, who are students or early postdocs, to apply for this European Society of Biomechanics Mobility Award 2023. And I wish you all the best for your research endeavors. Thank you.